Hi, thanks for joining. Oh, good. I see lots of little emoticons. I think that means people are here. Um, Very cool. I'm going to share my screen for just a second so that you can see slides. Here we go. All right. Well, I'm Chera Meredith, and I live here in East Tennessee with my husband, our two kids, and our 7 animals. I am the lead developer and designer at So Peculiar. It's a company that I started officially 4 years ago. We've shipped one small title called Wander in the Dark, a game jam game that I did with my son last year. But our first major project is a point and click adventure for kids titled Closer Than You Know. Closer Than You Know has been in development for 6.5 years. So I used to tell people every year that we're almost done, but I quit doing that after several disappointments. So it'll be done when it's done, but probably this year, really. Closer Than You Know is a special project for me. It was my gateway game, and I'll tell you more about that throughout the talk. But first, why should you listen to me? So, this talk is called I Don't Know What I'm Doing, but I'm Doing It Anyway. And my goal is to encourage you and equip you with some tools that will help you get started in making games. Or if you've been doing this for a long time and maybe you're feeling stuck or a bit burnt out, these things might help you move forward. If neither of those descriptions fit you, then maybe this is a good time for a snack. So, anyway, aside from the fact that I have slides and lots of photos that I stole from the internet to back up all my points, I have been doing things that I don't know how to do my whole life, and this is just one more. So I have a background in psychology, and I have worked as a volunteer in various ways with adults in trauma recovery, and I have worked for 5 years in the area of experiential learning. So experiential learning. This is actually the premise behind it is that we remember things better when they are tied to experiences, and that's because they engage our physical and emotional memories. So, when teaching experientially, we would design an activity, we would facilitate some kind of experience, and then we observe and see what things the students discover as a part of that experience. And I use this in a ministry context, and it was incredibly powerful. The truth that we discover for ourselves is always going to be more real to us than the truth that we're told. And so we all know that, this is something we use in game design, whether we call it experiential learning or not. We're creating experiences. In books and movies, we can have vicarious experiences, but in video games, there's interactivity. And so the player's brain is actually learning and processing information differently than had she been reading it in a book or watching it in a video. So the potential for learning with video games, both on an academic level and at an emotional level, is so much higher. And this is one of the two major reasons that I was drawn to video game design. The second reason is because I have kids, and this is the world that my kids are in. So there's this great book that I am putting on your required reading list right now, and it's called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. So whether you are just considering a step into the games industry or you've been here for 30 years, I highly recommend giving this a read. The premise of Start With Why is that when you know why you're doing something, how you do it becomes easier to determine, and what you do follows suit. So Sinek gives some hardships in his examples of entrepreneurship and knowing the why of your business and how that helps you to overcome a lot of the pitfalls that trap other entrepreneurs. But the same thing can be said of game development. So making a game, if you haven't heard, it's incredibly challenging, especially for indies where we have to perform so many different roles. And especially if you don't know what you're doing. So knowing your why might be the only thing that can really give you the mental and emotional stamina required to learn what you need to learn and keep going all the way to the end. So for me, and I think a lot of creatives just beginning in any field, we have this question of, can I even do this? Can I even make a game? Can I finish a game? And in my opinion, this is probably going to be your most difficult obstacle at the beginning. So I'm going to do my best to load you with as much ammunition as I can so that you can answer this question with a confident yes. And thank you. I see people posting links of the summary and of that book, Start With Why. That's really great. All right, for me, well, I'll read this quote here. It says, working hard for something we do not care about is called stress, and working hard for something we love is called passion. So my why for making a game, for making this one game, was that I wanted to create an experience for my kids that taught some truth about God. So I grew up in an alcoholic home, and I've had a lot of hard experiences that I've had to sort out, mostly in therapy, and hence the pursuit of psychology. But I recognize that there are things I know about who God is because of the experiences that I've had and the way that He showed up for me in the hard places. And while I never want my kids to experience those hard things, I do want them to know God just as deeply. And so I can't think of a better way to show them what I've learned than in a game. And that's my why. So I say all of that so that you can see that how my why has motivated me in various stages of this project. And even though I didn't know what I was doing, the why was too important for me not to try. And so I got started 6.5 years ago when I Googled how to make a video game. And over the last 6.5 years, I've learned how to design, program, and code, animate, edit audio, use a truckload of different tools, some of which I'm going to share with you. I've had days where I'm over the moon excited to start work in the morning, and other days where I've cried and thrown things across the room. I've had seasons of feeling really burnt out, and also seasons of feeling really inspired. So actually, here is an actual diagram of my project right here. Clearly, I stole this off the internet. It apparently came from Maureen McHugh, but I'm not even sure where I found it, but it's brought me so much joy and so much comfort. If you can't see it, it starts with, this is the best idea ever. And then it's, okay, this is harder than I thought. And then this is going to take some work. And then this sucks and it's boring. And then you enter the dark night of the soul, which is really terrible. And then the light at the end of the tunnel starts to appear, and you think, it'll be good to finish because I'll learn something for next time. And then finally, it's done, and it sucks, but it's not as bad as I thought. So I haven't finished our major project yet, so I'm really hoping there's a couple more points after that where it gets better, but we'll see. So I did go through the dark night of the soul for quite a while, and I feel like I'm probably at the it'll be good to finish stage at this point. So anyway, whether you are just beginning, if you're just beginning, you're probably like at the, this is the best idea ever. Maybe you've heard a few talks today and you're thinking, okay, this is harder than I thought. If you've been in games for a while, you might be somewhere down at the bottom. But either way, I would read Start With Why and then do the next thing. And not just the next thing, but the very next thing. And there's a difference. So I'll explain. I pray a lot when I don't know how to do things. I should probably pray more when I do know how to do things. But when I don't know, prayer comes more naturally. And the phrase that comes to mind so often for me when I don't know what to do is just do the next thing. And so after I had this idea for a game, I thought the next thing was to figure out how to build it. So I Googled how to make a video game, and it looked really hard. So I said, scratch that. Let's search game developer for hire. And it was crazy expensive. And neither option looked really good. But I couldn't shake this want for this game to be out there. I was just stuck. But I kept thinking about it and kept talking about it. And I eventually spoke with someone who told me that whether I made the game or hired developers, I would need a game design document. And he said a game design document it's an ever-changing document that contains everything about your game, something that I could reference or show others as the game progressed. And he even sent me a game design document online that he found. And so there it was. It was the very next thing. Oops, I lost my little notes. Give me 1 second. There we go. It was the very next thing. So I had thought the next thing was to start making something or paying a lot of money, but there was this hidden step in between that was actually very doable. And that's why I put little Waldo up here, because sometimes the very next thing is hard to see, and we may think we're stuck, but we just haven't found that very next step that's a little bit hidden. So I took that game design document and I began replacing all the text with my own stuff. If you Google game design documents, you'll find a few things that come up. So if that's your next thing, I would highly recommend starting that process of just writing some things down. 7 months later, I attended CGDC for the first time. Again, found it on Google. Google is really my friend. I showed up with at that time, I think it was 70 pages of game design. I mean, I had spent 7 months just writing ideas. So I came with this 70-page, really terrible game design document, hoping that I would find someone, honestly, who would be willing to make this game for me. So I honestly thought that if the idea was really good, someone would want it. And I quickly realized how wrong I was. There is no shortage of ideas among game developers. There are simply wonderfully talented and creative people in this community. They don't need more ideas. So I came with my little fish out of water, deer in headlights, all of that feeling, and and realized this is not how it's going to work. So what this community is not lacking is ideas, but they are lacking people to execute ideas. And sometimes we're lacking money, but we're still working on the money part. And so this talk is about ideas right now. Anyway, CGDC is one of the greatest things that I ever did. And they're not paying me to say this, but if you at all can attend the in-person conference in the summer, it's fantastic. I just can't recommend it enough. One of the greatest things that's come out of this conference for me has been the community. I found a lot of people to encourage me at the start, in the middle, even now. I met future collaborators, contractors. I met people there that I call family now. So it was really life-changing. Go to the conference. If you can, sign up for a SAGE group. CGDC offers online small groups that are great for building relationships and growing as a game developer. And here's another thing I want you to hear from this is I went to CGDC because I thought the next thing was to find someone to make my game. And it was the wrong next thing, but it still got me to the right place. So you might have an idea of what your next thing is, but you're not sure if it's the right thing. And I would encourage you to just do it. I mean, if you're talking about like selling your house and your children and all of that, and just going for it, like, maybe you think about that again. But if it's, do I use this engine or that engine, or do I make a 2D game or a 3D game? Like, you could literally flip a coin and just pick one and do it. Because if it's the wrong thing, you're going to figure it out really quickly. Isaiah 30:21 says, whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, and walk in it. So God's directing you. He's not trying to trick you. He'll let you know if you're really going the wrong way. But sometimes we get paralyzed by all the possible steps we could take. And there are a lot that we could take in this industry. So we sometimes just don't take any step for fear of getting it wrong. But if the wrong step leads you to the right step, then it might be just fine. So that's just a thought. Okay, there's a little maze that I forgot to click on, but there you go. Sometimes all the ways lead to the way you need to go. All right, and another thing is rest. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to move forward, is to take a little time off. If you're at the beginning, you might not feel like you need rest, and that's okay. If you're in the middle, if you're in the dark night of the soul, this might be a good thing for you. And there's a lot more that I could say about this, but Jason Lettingham just did such a great job of this earlier today. So I would recommend, if you didn't get a chance to see his talk, it was called Voice Acting with Christian Integrity. Definitely go check that out at the end of this. The one thing that I will add for the context of this particular subject is that I often feel guilty about taking time off. And so I'll keep working, but then I kind of drag my feet on the project, or I don't do such a great job, or sometimes I just procrastinate instead of actually taking the rest. And I think that's because I have this little voice in my head that says, look, you're not all that committed. Like, how passionate are you if you don't really want to work on it today? And that just makes any rest that I do really terrible. So here's how I've learned to deal with that, is I time box my rest. So now it's an intentional thing. And even if that means I take a day off or a week off or a summer off, it doesn't matter how long, but if it's my plan and I tell someone this is the plan, then I'm not quitting and I'm not dragging my feet. Shifting my focus for a period, and I'm doing it on purpose because I know when I come back, my perspective is going to be so much better. Decisions that I got hung up on before are that were really tricky are super clear to me now. I have new experiences that I can draw from for whatever I'm creating. So time box your rest and make it a part of your development process. And I think that helps with some of the guilty feelings that some of us might be dealing with. So we're kind of in the middle, but I wanted to give you this quick reference dump. I would go ahead and take a screenshot or whatever you want to do to remember and dive into this later. For me, I would say half the challenge has been the mental battle of believing that I can actually learn and do all the things that are required to make a game. So I have collected a lot of resources over the years to encourage my own mind. And I get really inspired by hearing other people talk about their process. How do they do what they do? And sometimes I just get a little nugget. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that's not at all the way that I want to do things. But hearing them talk about the struggle of finding their own way to do what they love, even if it's an author or a director or screenwriter, it encourages me that I can find my own way too. And I will say on this list, I've included Blood, Sweat, and Pixels and Adorning the Dark. Those are two books that you can read with a Sage group from CGDC. So take a look at those or go to cgdc.org and see the Sage groups. All right, so technical difficulties. There are definitely a lot of technical challenges that I face too in this space. So even if I'm mentally feeling motivated, there's just a lot of different skills needed to make a game from scratch. There's design, coding, art, animation, sound, music. In AAA, those all have subcategories and various specialties, and you might just do one job the whole time. But in an indie studio, we have to wear a lot of hats. And if you're a single developer, you're going to wear all the hats. That's a lot of work. So some of the advice that I see given in some of these communities is to start small. You build something small, manageable, you learn what you can, then you apply it to a larger project. That's a great idea. And I didn't do any of that. I started really, really big. And that was because I didn't want to learn how to make games. I wanted to make this game. It was one game. That's all I wanted to do. And then I really thought I'd just finish that and then I'll go back to doing whatever else. Anyway, I don't know that was a worse way to do it. I don't know that it was a better way to do it. For me, it worked because it fit my why. The why was this game is important and I want to make this game. And so that's just what I needed to be motivated. I could learn a new tool or a new skill if it fit my why, if it helped me accomplish the goal. But I wasn't really interested in learning how to code a little arcade game. That didn't speak to me. So my advice for you would be do what makes sense according to your why. If you're wanting to build a studio and work in games professionally, it makes a lot of sense to start small and build up to something more. But if you've got a passion project that really gets you excited, maybe that's just what you need to start with and work on things that help build that project for you. So why do you want to make a game? Why do you care? What do you want to accomplish? I don't think your why has to be something really profound or life-changing. I just think you need to know what it is. I tend to make things really spiritual and deep, but that's just my weird issue, and it doesn't have to be what you're doing. Some games are really fun. They just bring joy, and that's incredibly significant. There's a lot of other games now that are on my to-do list that I want to make after this that are just for fun, things that I want to play. And my why for those will be a little bit different, but I will still go through the process of figuring out why I'm doing it. Because as we discussed, the dark night of the soul is really dark. And aside from surviving the dark night of the soul, knowing why you want to do what you're doing is going to help direct you as far as what you need to learn. And so let's talk about tools. The toolbox. There are a lot of tools available for beginning and seasoned developers, and there's no shame in leaning on the foundations that others have built. If you know your why and you're creating a game in an established genre, look for a game engine or a tool for that genre. Okay, you can get a huge head start, and you're more likely to actually get to the end of your project. So at the start of Closer Than You Know, I didn't know how to code, and the thought of learning how to code felt so overwhelming. And it was Scott Jacobson here, one of the hosts and moderators, who recommended that I check out Adventure Creator. It's a script kit that works with Unity, and it's designed to make adventure games. And because it was a little more accessible for me, it uses visual scripting. So I could take a box and I could drag a line to another box, and that made more sense to me in my brain. It felt more attainable. And so that was where I started. And I still had to watch. I mean, I watched the tutorial for that. It's like a 3-hour tutorial. I think I watched it like 5 times straight through before I even started. And I had to Google all the vocabulary because I didn't know any vocabulary. I'm like, what does this mean? I don't even know what this term is. And so it was just so much like research to even get started with the tutorial. I would do it while I was washing dishes or folding laundry or whatever. I had 2 young kids at home, so I'm just like trying to squeeze it in here and there. Anyway, it's doable. But if you have a why, it's going to really help you get motivated to do that. Interestingly enough, since I have gotten really familiar with Unity and Adventure Creator and this script kit, I have actually learned some code since then. I've learned a lot of other tools that were daunting at the beginning, but starting with something like this helped me build confidence, and it helped me at least just recognize some of the basic principles of programming and things like that. So anyway, there's a few other tools. Let me see if I can get these to come up. Yeah, so if you have an RPG in mind, and this is really something you want to make, RPG Maker, it's a really great tool. There's a great tutorial for that one too. I have an 11-year-old son, and he can use RPG Maker. What else? Here we go, Dungeon Crawler. I'd say Construct 3 would be a good thing to look into. Some of these you probably have heard of. And these are my recommendations, and I haven't really used these very thoroughly. So do your Googling, do your searching, and see what else is out there. But one thing I would recommend is when you find a tool or an engine, check out their showcase. Or most engines will really want to advertise what was made with them. And so if you look at their showcase and you see a game that looks like something that you would want to make, or has the capability of what you want to make, then that's a good indicator that this is something for you. And then you can dive in a little bit deeper and start watching tutorials and Googling vocabulary. Okay, the next thing I had to say was a little bit cringy, so I covered it with Michael Scott. When you know your why, the next thing's a little bit easier. So consider your scope. And I know this is hard for a lot of us. This was super hard for me, but consider what you want to accomplish and determine what is the minimum product necessary in order to really accomplish that. Mark Cerny talks about this. He's done a lot of things. I can't tell you what all the things he's done. I know he worked on Sonic the Hedgehog 2, I think, and a lot of other really famous games that I can't think of right now. But he's a big deal. And he gives this talk about what is known now as the Cerny method. I think there's a link to that talk, or I typed it out on the reference dump that I just gave you. Highly recommend watching that. The Cerny method is basically that you spend the bulk of your time in pre-production. And pre-production is where you're experimenting, you're figuring out exactly what kind of game you want to make before you begin building it. And you make a lot of prototypes and you throw away a lot of prototypes. And his philosophy is that if you fail fast, you'll get to the best ideas more quickly. So if you think about that concept, failing fast, getting to the best game quickly, along with your scope and the idea of starting with why, well, let's just break it down a little bit. Okay, if your why is to teach kids about the Bible, does it really have to be an MMORPG? Like, could it be a 2D side-scrolling adventure game? Could it be a first-person puzzle game? I originally had in mind that I would make this 3D open-world adventure game because I like playing those. And my 70-page design document was based on this vision. But as I talked with other experienced developers, people with wisdom, I realized that my scope was going to be a hindrance. I would have to hire a lot more. I would have to spend a lot more. I'd have to learn a lot more. And if that was my why, like if what I really wanted was to make the best MMORPG or the best open world 3D game, like that would be motivating. That would be what I'd have to do. But that wasn't my why. So I just couldn't justify the time and effort that it would take to make that kind of game. Quality is always better than quantity. And it was important to me that I made something that looked and felt like quality. And ultimately, I decided that I would be better or I'd be more likely to achieve that vision if the scope was smaller. And if the genre of game was something that I could better wrap my head around, being new to it. I grew up on point and click adventures. I just talked with Gerald. I can't remember your last name, Gerald, but he's here at the conference, and he said he worked for Cera Online. Had a little fangirl moment right there, but I grew up on the point and click adventures of King's Quest series and all these things. So I went back to the drawing board, tried to reimagine my game as a 2D point and click, and we cut about half of what was initially planned. Honestly, I probably could have cut another half, and probably should have. Live and learn. Can't let it all go. Still a work in progress. But as we have developed the game and come to a better understanding of what we're actually making and the story that we're telling, I have continued to modify and adapt the vision to better fit our why. And I'll say, to be candid, it's hard when you talk about scaling back, especially if you have a passion project or something you feel like God's really talked to you about. It feels a little bit like giving up or sacrificing some of the vision. But as I prayerfully talked to him about what all was going on with me, I feel like he revealed some things in me and called me out that I have a tendency to do things big or not at all, and that can be a problem. My husband would say he has no idea what I'm talking about because he's a smart man, but that is an area where I need to grow. So, one perspective that really helped me come to terms with the decisions that I needed to make is that I needed to look at my game from the perspective of my potential player, which for me has always been 5 to 8 year old kids. Let me see. There we go. Okay, you can get real intentional about this by creating a player profile. So I opened up a Google Doc and I wrote a little bit about who was going to play my game. How old are they? What kind of games do they like? What do they like to play with when they're not doing games? What do they like in school? The more specific that you get, the better you're going to be able to fine tune your game for that one player. And I also considered my scope. Does it really matter to my 6-year-old player if the game is 2D or 3D? I don't think so. So it was a lot easier to say, let's just go with 2D because it's going to be much easier to produce that kind of work. Does it matter if it's a 10-hour game or a 5-hour game? I actually felt like the answer to that for me was a shorter game is way better for our age group. Our target age is 5 to 8. They're not going to play a 10-hour game, at least not in one setting. They're going to have to break it up. And so it's more likely to not be finished. And the whole point of the thing would be missed. So we made a lot of choices for the sake of our player when we started looking at it from that angle. And that just meant that I could shift my energy to things that actually mattered, that actually moved it forward and got us closer to accomplishing our goal. So know your why, know who you're designing for, and adjust your scope to fit those two things. This kind of work, this pre-production work, is very likely to eliminate a lot of your technical challenges because you're narrowing your focus on the things that are really important. You're eliminating some of the extraneous things that you would have to learn or troubleshoot. All right, ask for help. If you're really, really stuck, like if you have a prototype that you're working on and that big red exclamation mark keeps coming up, I learned that's a bad thing, and you don't know how to fix it, you ask for help. If you've tried to design that puzzle several times and now you're crying and you're eating Oreos and you don't know what to do next, these are just random specific examples, by the way. They're not at all things that I've done. You ask for help during those times. And there's a big difference between asking someone to work on your game and asking someone to help you learn how to make your game. And so I've found that it's near impossible to get someone to volunteer to work on your game. But there is help readily available within the games industry. and not just in the Christian game developers industry. People love to talk about what they've done. People love to talk about how they did it, especially indie developers who put a lot of time and soul into their work. So I've had the most success with reaching out to individual indie developers and asking them really specific questions. There was a fun point and click adventure that came out on mobile a few years ago. It was called Agent A. And I just thought they did a great job making that game feel really engaging. I was like, this is the kind of thing that I want to do with Closer Than You Know. And so I reached out to Yak & Co. That was the development team. And I complimented them on their great game. And I said, you did a fantastic job with keeping every environment really engaging. How did you do that? And they responded. And they gave me some really great references, some very specific tools of flow charts and things that they did to make that and how they were intentional about that. So, I was like, are they sharing their secret sauce? I don't know, but it was awesome. They were really willing to help out. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions when you are stuck. But if you ask really general questions, I think sometimes people just don't know how to encourage or how to answer that. And so be specific. And I've been continually surprised and thankful for how accessible people are within the industry and how willing they are to help, especially when they see that you're hungry to learn and you're willing to do the work. So it can be really uncomfortable feeling like you don't know what you're doing all the time. But I have found that if I just acknowledge that I have a lot to learn and I lean into that posture instead of trying to I don't know, fake it, I just position myself to glean a lot from people. All right. And finally, I want to say be confident and flexible. So there's nothing like someone telling me to be confident to make me hyper aware of how insecure that I feel. So I really hate to even say that out loud, but really, imposter syndrome runs rampant among game developers. And if you haven't heard that term, imposter syndrome is the feeling that you don't belong here because you're not as capable or accomplished as someone else. And I will tell you now it's just a lie. You are needed here. God made each individual person to reflect himself. And that means that you have something in you that I can't know or see, something about God that I can't know or see unless you share it. So, whatever story or mechanic or artwork or business model you have that's rolling around in your head, please take the next step. Make it something real that you can share with the rest of us. And be flexible. Be open to what God is teaching you and be willing to pivot. This process of developing a kids' video game has been, oddly enough, like one of the most spiritual experiences of my life. I've learned so much about who God is as a creator, a producer, a shepherd, a counselor, and I look to him for a lot of guidance. I've even gotten stuck with technical issues and prayed about it and then had a solution come to me, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So don't limit yourself to the solutions that you understand, but the Holy Spirit is full of creative stuff. I've had programming solutions come to me in the middle of worship where I've prayed and walked away, and the weird issue with Unity that I just didn't understand wasn't there anymore. Pray, ask others to pray with you. Take some time to listen and see what ideas or thoughts come to mind. He might call you out on some things that you have going on, and you'll have to wrestle with why you really want to make that game or why it really has to be this way. But know that he's for you, and whatever it is, wherever it is that you feel uncertain or stuck, maybe just take some time to ask the Lord if he has anything to say to you about that. And that's it. So I appreciate your time. I've got a few minutes, I think, to take questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, too. All right, there we go. With your psych background, how do you suggest indies deal with burnout, or how do you deal with burnout? Like I said, I'm not really great with rest. That's tough for me because I'm a stay-at-home mom and I work part-time. So I struggle with like feeling like I need to get stuff done whenever I have time available. Rest is one of the best things I've learned. Just go ahead and take some time off. Give yourself a break. And one of my biggest fears with time off is I'm like, what if I don't go back to it? What if I don't want to go back to it? And so that's where, for me, being a little bit accountable, I can tell my husband, look, I just need a week off. I'm just going to take 1 week and then I'll go back to work. And he's very cool with that. He's very supportive. So that helps me a little bit. It also helps. I'm going to say something that some people might not like this, but work on another project. Like, that's okay. Um, Sometimes just working on something on the side a little bit, if you time box it, like, you're gonna go back. You're gonna go do the main thing again. That's okay. But if you just take a little time, work on something fun, give your brain something else to chew on for a bit. That's really helpful. I like to go outside. I like to build things outside. So sometimes I'll go, I don't know, I'll build a new rabbit hutch, compost bin, or whatever. We have lots of animals. Um, and sometimes I'm work on another small game. And you know what? Another game sounds really fun. It's very alluring. And I get a few days into it and realize there's a lot of problems with this game too. And now I want to go back to the other one because I at least know those problems. So sometimes that's enough to just help you feel motivated again. It's a good question. How do you stay motivated? What's your biggest win of the project thus far? Although that was from Anna Carpio. So that's Ruby. I call her Ruby, and she works with me. So I stay motivated. I think by when I think about my original vision for the project, my original vision and what I thought it could be. There's a long season. It's just now kind of looking like the game that I thought it could be, which gets me really excited. There was a long season where I was like, I don't know if the reality is ever going to be as good as what it is in my head. And that's kind of discouraging. But I have to believe that if God is who He says He is, that He's big enough to hold me, even if I'm disappointed with the final result. And so I just have to keep going. I want to be the kind of person that finishes, and my kids are watching. I want to be the kind of person who does something big and finishes, and that's important. So that's my biggest motivation. And biggest win of the project is, oh my gosh, all the other things. Like, aside from the game, it's the people that I've met along the way, and it's the communities that I've built, the things that I've learned about myself and about God, and the ways that my husband and I have learned how to communicate better throughout this project. It's just, there's all this other stuff that comes with it because God is such a multitasker. That's been really cool to see how He does those things. When juggling family life and game dev, do you ever lose momentum on the game through seasons of busyness, and how do you get going again? Yeah, definitely lose some momentum. There's a lot of transitions with kids. We got summer, so there's this transition after school, and then there's a transition when school starts, and then there's Christmas and birthdays and all those things that just, and those are the important things, truthfully. Like that, those are the memories that they're going to have and I'm going to have, is how we did those things, how, if we did them well or not. And so that is where my heart is. And so I do have to give myself permission to focus on some of those other family things a little bit more. But it is, there's also a part of me that just really loves game dev, and that's what I want to do with my time. How do I get motivated again? There's something called a transition. I think writers use this little tool. Like, if you're going to try to get in the creative space, it helps to find a transition that helps your brain get excited about that, get back into that space. For me, there's a song. The title of our game came from a song by Hillsong United, and it's called Closer Than You Know. And I was just listening to it pretty much on repeat as I was writing the game. And I loved the story of the song. It really matched what I was writing. Maybe it influenced what I was writing, or maybe I liked it because it matched what I was writing. I'm not really sure which came first, but that's my song. And so sometimes if I really have a hard time getting in the zone, I will put that song on and I listen to it, and I think about the game that came to my head, when it first started, and that vision comes back, and that helps me get in that space again. So that's just a little trick that I have to get motivated. And then if I'm having a harder time, sometimes just time away is good. Yeah. Are you planning ahead for the marketing and release of your game? If so, what steps are you taking? Whew, these are hard questions. We are starting to starting to plan for that. And I joke about releasing this year. We're trying really hard to release this year. One of the things that we're doing is we're trying out Soma's QA new system that they have. So we're going to work on that a little bit. We just put together a demo that we are going to release within the next month or two. If you're interested in playing that, you can sign up for our email list, sopeculiar.com, and we would love to have you test and give some feedback. Our marketing plan, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. We don't really know what to do. The best idea that we've had came from Jeff Neat in this community, and he talked about being a big fish in small ponds. And so we thought, let's just find as many small ponds as we can, whether that's, a Reddit thread or a Discord group or a Facebook group or whatever, and try to post and, drum up some attention and then go from there. There's lots of YouTubers that I've been kind of researching, lightly stalking, just to see if they would be good fits to maybe play through our game that we'll reach out to when that time comes as well. But it's hard to think about all those different layers. I'm the designer, I'm the programmer, I'm mom, I'm wife, all those things. So sometimes that hat is like the last one that I want to put on, the marketing hat, to be honest. Are your kiddos play testers, and how's that going? Yes, they are my first testers. Sometimes they roll their eyes and are like, "Ugh, again, do we have to play it again?" At first, they thought it was really cool, and now they're like, "Mom, I've played this game so many times." My 11-year-old is my most honest critic, and he actually has, I think, a really good eye for game design. He watches a lot of Game Maker's Toolkit and all that stuff. He's going to be a game designer when he grows up, and he's going to be way better than you, Mom, and that's great. I hope he is. Anyway, so yeah, they do test for me, and then if I can steal other people's kids, they're a lot nicer, but they don't always want to tell me. They don't want to tell me if it's not fun. So my kids they're pretty good critics. They're good testers. Is there a way for us to stay updated on your game projects? Yes. SoPeculiar.com. We have a link for our Facebook, Twitter. I don't post a whole lot. We do send out an email like once every, I don't know, 6 months or something. So I definitely won't fill up your inbox, but I will let you know when we have something for you to play and test. It's a good way to keep up. Thank you for asking. Any other questions? And Matt just sent me a message. Okay, that was the last question. All right, I'm going to be hanging out afterwards. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you all being here.